Hello, my name is Lady Just. As we get closer to the end of Nana Addo's administration, I'm reviewing what had been accomplished. I went and spoke with the Minister of Education to find out what has been accomplished in that sector. This is Truth in Politics. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page right now. Like our page before I continue. You've done that? Okay, thank you. I asked someone in a casual conversation about his investments. He looked at me in amusement and pointed to his 3 children. And I said, maybe you didn't hear me. I meant your investment. And he still smiled and pointed to his 3 children who were all professionals. So I said, wait, I'm lost. But before I could utter another word, he interjected and said, I could have built properties and left them for them, but I educated them well so that they can be positioned to not only build their own empires, but take good care of whatever I leave them. As Ghanaians cry about the economy and how things are so tough, I can tell you that the Nana Addo government took the approach of the wise man with the 3 well-educated and professional children. As a developing nation, it is not everything we spend money on that would yield returns immediately. Good leaders develop for the future, and you're about to see why I say this. I sat down with the Honorable Minister of Education, Dr. Adutwum, and what he has been quietly doing to transform education in this country is similar to what that man did for his children. So if Ghanaians are not seeing the results of the transformational education program that has transpired in the last 6.5 years, I'm convinced that Ghana will reap the results of Nana Addo's massive investment in education in the future. Take a listen to my conversation with the Minister for Education.
One of the main indicators that enable the country to know if they are on the right track for transformation or not is what is called the gross tertiary enrollment ratio. That is to say, if you go to a community where there are about 100 people between the ages of 18 and 22, you may ask the chief, Nana, how many people are in tertiary education overall? We are not just referring to those between 18 and 22. So if the total number of people in tertiary education within the 18 to 22, outside the 18-22 is, let's say, 20, the gross tertiary enrollment ratio is 20 over 100, which is 20%. Same can be extrapolated to the country or a region, and you'll be able to calculate the gross tertiary enrollment ratio. What researchers have seen is the relationship between the gross tertiary enrollment ratio and the transformation of a country. Countries that reach 50% plus, they see transformation. Because at that point, you have the critical mass with the critical minds to change your country.
Critical mass with the critical minds
to change your country. So if you do not have a large percentage of people moving on from secondary to tertiary, you don't get a high gross tertiary enrollment ratio. Ghana's gross tertiary enrollment ratio, as we speak with you, of 20%. There has been a change within the last 4, 5, 6 years. 20% is one of the highest in sub-Saharan Africa, because the sub-Saharan average is 7%. But no country has changed its socioeconomic fortunes in the 21st century with 20% gross tertiary enrollment ratio. Researchers will tell you that one of the most important predictors of socioeconomic transformation, of course, plus industry, plus healthcare issues, education is so prominent. Why is education so prominent? as I told you, once more people move on to tertiary, you have more critical thinkers. No matter what the job that they are involved in, you get better outcomes. So you can't talk about Malaysia and all these countries, Singapore, that have changed their fortune without tracking their gross tertiary enrollment ratio. And once you move that up, like China, moving 50% and up, they reduce the percentage of people in extreme poverty. You see, in the 1990s, Africa's share of people within the extreme poverty bracket was about 25%. Then the Asian tigers and others in China and Vietnam and Southeast Asian countries began transformation, and they moved their people out of extreme poverty. So now if they show you the pie graph of people with extreme poverty in the world, Africa is about 80% because they have left us in that pie graph. They've moved out from that pie graph, and we are left there in that pie graph with extreme poverty in the world. How do you transform Africa without education? Impossible. But if you are to focus on gross tertiary enrollment ratio, how do you get a high gross tertiary enrollment ratio with a low gross secondary enrollment ratio? So you have to open the floodgates of education to all by removing the cost barrier that have prevented about 50% of our junior high school students from moving up to tertiary. Once you do that, then you are preparing a foundation for socioeconomic transformation. Recently, Brookings Institution in the US did a study, and they said that it will take 120 years for developing countries to catch up with the developed nations in the area of education. 120 years.
120 years.
But they said something profound, that the countries that will be able to reduce that years are those who will leapfrog inequality. I always make a sample to people and say, if you live in the village, you've been to the riverside, if you see a frog, does the frog walk away from you, crawl away from you, or they leap and they leap, they leap and they leap? By the time you know, you can't see them any longer. So leapfrogging means you cannot walk, you have to leap. So if Ghana wants to change its fortunes in education, what do? We knew that we didn't have enough school facilities. That is why there was, in secondary education, that's why there was something called cutoff point. In the olden days, people call it pass no way. You sit for the BECE, or in the olden days, the common entrance, you've passed. But because there are limited spaces in the secondary school, they then decide that if you got aggregate 26, you will not be enrolled in any public high school. It doesn't mean you are not good enough, but there are no spaces for you. Consequently, the very poor in this country were the ones who were denied access to our own public senior high schools using what was called a cutoff. So you get at grade 26, some years you can't go to a public high school. And these are students who are coming from our public primary and junior high school, and then the country tells them, by the way, your grade is not good enough, it's not our fault, it's your fault. You will not be allowed to go to a public high school. Your mother should find money for you to go to a private high school. So there were a number of private high schools that sprang up across the country for the poor. Those who don't have money were the ones who were told to go and borrow to send their children to high school. Those who are well-to-do will send their children to the private primary, junior high school. They do so on the BECE. They form 30% of our population. But after the BECE is done, they move to occupy 90% of our top-performing high school that we call the Ivy League schools. That is the great injustice that has been meted out to those from deprived background. That is the kind of country we lived in before Free Snare. Then Free Snare has to come now the Dan Kokufuadu serves to us, allow everybody to go. There's no point cutting the poor out. Allow the poor to come in. Now the poor coming in that there were no facilities, and therefore we come up with an innovative process, an innovative program called the Double Track, which is called year-round schools in many developed nations, including America. We borrowed this from California. being able to grow enrollment from 800,000 to 1.4 million. That is a leapfrogging strategy. Because if you were to wait to build all the schools, the research showed, and it was said by a late former minister under the NDC, Leo Kran, that it was going to take us 20 years to implement free senior high school because there were no buildings. You divide the students into 3 tracks, you send 2 of them there, 1 is at home. You don't lose contact hours, but you lose some number of days of instruction. So instead of school starting from 8 a.m. to 2:30, now schools start from 8 to 4. Every week you are adding more hours. So even though you reduce the number of days by 12, by 15, the students are not losing anything because the contact hours is more.
So eventually it adds up.
Wow. Then you say to yourself, now that everybody can go, I presume that some students will have learning challenges. Therefore, we are giving schools intervention grants, free money. Give it to teachers so that they can teach them extra on Saturdays and before school. They can teach them extra. Then you say, we have to make investment in these young men and women. If we're going to pay their tuition and pay their boarding fees for them to go for free, we get a better outcome if we buy textbook for everyone. So you buy textbook for everyone. And you say, we want to place more emphasis on science. So if you are doing science, we're even going to give you biology, chemistry, physics, elective math textbook for free so that your parents don't have to do anything. Then, as a consequence of your investment, instead of students staying at home to wait for their fees and staying at home for a month when school opens, now when school opens, they are there during the first week. During the exam, they are not sent out to go and collect their fees. By the way, when they get to WASI and they have to pay for registration fee, the government pays it so that no student have to go home and get their tuition. You have the attention for a long period of time. Therefore, your learning outcomes improves. So what most people don't understand is that Ghana literally has defied gravity.
Ghana has defied gravity.
And the reason why I say that is this: around the world, it's all shown by research that if you increase enrollment, your learning outcome diminish. So the interesting thing is that, so there are some researchers, some professors in Ghana who have said free senior high school has not worked. Because research has taught them in school and when they were teaching that if you increase enrollment, outcome diminish. Why does outcome diminish? Because when you increase enrollment short term and you don't have the building, you increase class sizes.
Definitely.
So instead of 40 students, it's 80 students. Therefore, the teacher don't get to teach them well. But the moment you introduce double track, you reduce class sizes. Accra girls, during the first year of the double track, instead of 50 students in the class, it diminished to 30. So you see, you have done something unthinkable by using an approach. The approach that says, why don't I increase contact hours every day, reduce the number of days in the school year, and get better outcome because the contact hours is from 8 to 4 instead of from 8 to 2 or 2:30.
Let me go back to the free SHS that we talked about earlier. I mean, you educated us on it vastly, but some have concerns that we need to scale back and eliminate the burden, school side. What do you say to that?
You see, the point of the matter is this. In a developing country like ours, where certain sections of our society don't have schools, it's difficult to talk about eliminating boarding schools. Very difficult. There was this move towards day senior high schools. Mills, Mahama did a great job building E-blocks. But what came out eventually was that if you do the E-block in a remote community in Ghana, in spite of your best interventions, best intentions, you cannot operationalize them. Because in that village where you dropped the beautiful edifice called E-block, there are only 30 students who are graduating from junior high. So if you drop that big school there, it will have 30 students first year, 30 students second year, 30 students, so 90 students in a school that can take 1,200. Where should the rest of the students come from? Far away places. They have to come and rent a room in that community, rooms that may not exist. The aggravation of children not being supervised by any parent coming to faraway places. Look at a place like in Saura, where my younger brother Tete is the minister. Is the member of parliament. He was the deputy minister for the region, but he's the member of parliament. You go to Saura, there are farming communities in the area. Students have to walk 10 miles to get in Saura to go to school. Parents then decide how to rent a place at Saura for these children to live. Nobody supervises them. It became a disaster. The government had to quickly go in under another Danko Kufuado to build dormitory at Saura. Now Saura is a boarding school. Same thing with Adanse Apeja. School has been there, building has been there, the community was agitating, open the school. But we knew that if we open the school, only about 30 students will enroll one every year. So we quickly had to put up boarding facility there. So Adanse Apeja has now opened with 200 plus students. Fantastic. Because there's a dormitory there. And the school is now boarded. You look at Drobonso, a school that's about 2-3 miles away from the town Drobonso. Can't open it because you can't open the school as a day school. So now what have we done? We added dormitory blocks there. So if you count the number of e-blocks that we've completed, wherever it's in a remote location, we have to do a serious intervention. So now this way is this. I'll continue wherever my predecessors left, but also make sure it serves Ghanaians.
So Mahama was touting himself as the infrastructure, king, but basically you would conclude that not much thinking ahead was put into it. It didn't serve the purpose, basically. Good buildings,
but poor for education policy. The ones that were built in the cities, like Kwabinya 1, excellent location. It filled up quickly. We even went in and built more, supported by GMPC under the former CEO, Dr. Sapon. They even added one building there. It's filled up because it's an excellent location for a day school. The one at Frafraha also filled up quickly. The one at Greek in Zima filled up quickly. But same cannot be said of the majority of e-blocks that were built in the middle of nowhere in a remote village, where you could not open them. So the point of the matter is this. Our approach is simple. Don't abandon e-blocks, but if you are going to operationalize them, add a dormitory block and make it a full-fledged senior high school, not just a community day, because the community day cannot serve a rural community.
This is part 1 of the focus on education. I'll be back with part 2 shortly. My name is Lady Just, and this has been Truth in Politics.